And now our first lecture today is going to be Eva Kail. For me, it's an incredible honor having her here today because she is, I want to highlight that what one person is able to do if she proposes this. She was, from 1991, she has been working in Vienna and making as a leader in a global project for the city. 25 years, 30 years after, the city has changed by the work begun by one person. And for me, it's the most relevant thing. Then she has been incorporating the gender mainstreaming into architecture, urbanism, the administration of the city, competition rules, and legislation. There is not a few things. So she has put forward a model, a role model that all of us, when we want to see what we could do, see Vienna. Vienna and Eva Kail work. So thank you so much for being here today. So the floor is yours.
So good morning from my side. Thank you for inviting me. And I just want to make a contradiction to Eva. It's not me as a person. I think I have contributed with my work, but I think it really needs everything. So it needs the support of politicians. I think this is really crucial. It needs cooperation and openness within people in administration. And I think it was also the chance that we could start in Vienna 30 years ago, that it's a bit the time spirit. I think there are sometimes windows of opportunity, and then it's important that you jump in and that you start your work. And we have been inspired by other cities, and I hope you can pick up some ideas or inspirations, the ways we have tried to go in Vienna. But it's not this, I think it needs energy, and but I think it really needs a surrounding. So that's, and of course you are telling in a lecture like that, you show your successes, you don't show your failures. You don't, so I can also tell you a lot of stories and obstacles, but I think it's always better to get the inspiration. And I guess there are some colleagues from administration, so we all know it's a very complex system with a lot of contradictory forces sometimes. So, and I think the important thing is to go the right way. And I have learned, I'm really impressed to learn that there is so much female power now on the political level in Valencia. So I was really impressed by that. And I hope this will really change the fabric of the city on the long run, because we know it's a long-going profession, planning. What was the starting point in Vienna? I think it was really this second wave of the women's movement, and where the male perspective started to be questioned on all the different levels. So for me, always the most impressive thing was medicine. So what we have learned, it can really be dangerous for your life if there is only this gender blindness, if there is only, because all the drugs have been tested only for men. And also the interpretation of symptoms and diagnosis, for example, heart attacks, they have only been the male symptoms. And then now the medicine system started to realize only since some years that this really threatens the life of the female patients. And I think this, what I have really learned over the years, I think it's really this system of calibration. What is the pattern you have in mind, and what is the norm you are taking, underlying your professional action? And I think the planning profession is a very specific one, because the professional self-understanding is we know what is good for everybody. And this is the professional understanding. And planning has to deal all the time with conflicting goals. We know this, it's very complicated for green areas, for mobility issues, for density. And we have to, and this takes place in an everyday context. And you as a professional, you say you have this, you make your decisions with the interests of everybody in mind, but you are influenced by your own personal everyday life experience. And therefore, this is what there was this discussion from feminist planners saying that we have a white, now we see also white middle-class male bias in our, and it's a one-sided calibration which has really influenced all the planning decisions. And we have this German saying, those in the shadows are not seen. And I think this is really, we know that the city is not only a technical system, but a social system. There is a strong interference between urban structures, mobility conditions, and the quality of everyday life. And this is really the aim of gender planning, to stand in different shoes, to take different perspectives. And we have this branding in Vienna of fair shared city. So it's really a question of fairness, to really take into consideration the competing interests of user groups and to try to get a fair balance in the allocation of means and the prioritization of measurements. But you can also argue it on a neoliberal argument at the question of efficiency. If you know more about your customer interests, and the customers of city administrations are people living in your city, and if you know more and more differentiated about their needs, you get a higher efficiency out of all your activities. And so the aim is really to raise the social sensibility in planning processes. And we always say it's a specification of common welfare, gender planning, and it's really a quality assessment strategy for planning decisions. And I think maybe this you already know, so it's beyond biological categories. It's about, we say in Vienna, we are using the gender plus concept. It's about social roles. It's about life phases and cultural, economic, and social backgrounds and people with specific needs. And there are really differences in the share of care work, in the leisure interests, the mobility patterns, and also the probability of sexual harassment and rape. So the aims for neighborhoods, it's really, so this bullshit wording, a practical neighborhood, city of short differences, that you have different offers for leisure, of sport and playgrounds, good mobility conditions for all traffic modes, specifically for the sustainable ones, a safe neighborhood with functioning social control, a good connectivity to the other parts of the city, and carefully designed buildings and open spaces. And what I really have learned over the years is that public spaces produce the social capital of a neighborhood. It's the public space where there is interconnection. And I think it's about the design and equipment hold the different needs for different groups. On the urban design level, you have to fight already for the availability of spaces, that there are enough parks and there are enough places and squares. But then it's really also about the design. And we always say, because very often there is this aim about this integration, and I say it's not a realistic aim. The more realistic aim is there is a coexistence of different groups with rather a low conflict level. So I think this is also important, that it's an illusion that every group will have the acceptance and understanding and appreciation of the other groups, for example, for homeless people or young people and old people. But if there is enough place and intelligent design, then we can reach a coexistence. And care work is a cross-cutting issue on all the different levels of planning facilities. Vienna is the capital of Austria. It has 1.9 million inhabitants, so it's a bit larger than Valencia. In all these international rankings, we are always have quite a high ranking. And I think we have some favorable conditions because we have a very good public transport system. So for historical reasons, we are always a bit slow in our development. So this complete car orientation of the city, it did not take place. We didn't destroy our tram system, for example, like Los Angeles. It's still the public transport company is in the ownership of the city. We are quite known for our social housing system. So we really have a huge stock of social housing and subsidized housing. So more than 60% of people in Vienna have rent-controlled, living in rent-controlled flats. So this is really an important value. And so the level of public services is still quite high, although we all are fighting all the cities with financial crisis and to hold the level of by increasing demands. So over these 30 years, Eva has already mentioned this, we could have developed in different fields of activity, so public purpose building, housing, mobility, urban development, park designs and playgrounds, and I will show you a little bit. What we have started was really, now people live there already since 25 years. This was our first big project, and it was already at that period, 30 years ago, that we were in a period of urban expansion, and we need a new urban design, new zoning plans, because all the new projects took place on agricultural areas. And it was although there already were female architects, 2 of them teaching urban design on German universities, but all the urban, we had this system of invited competitions, so it were not open competitions, but 5 to 6 offices were invited to make proposals, and all of them were men at that time. And so the new structures again are defined from a male perspective. And at that time, I was the first head of the women's office of Vienna. I'm an urban planner by education. And so the idea was really to change this and to realize a pilot project with 2 aims. One aim was really empowerment of female architects. So we only invited female architects. And on the other side, because there already existed in Germany projects and quality criteria of feminist urban design. And we just wanted to see how this functions and what would be the criteria for the Viennese planning context. And it was also interesting when I proposed this to our city planning city councillor. He said, only female architects, is this really necessary? And this sounds so silly. And then I said, I make you a proposal, just make the relation the other way around. We will involve to the same degree men as up to now female architects have been involved in urban design competitions. And then we are again back to 0. And then he was convinced, and then he realized that this is really a topic. And here you see, this is Gisela Potreca, Lieselotte Peretti, Franziska Ullmann, and Elsa Prohaska. And the urban design was by Franziska Ullmann, and it was really because there were these different semi-public spaces. So this is a combination of social housing and subsidized housing. And we decided for this project because there are different typologies. You have a central place, you have two shielded garden yards, you have this central pedestrian axis widening here to a green space, and you have here these more open green areas. So you can see it here, and this was really the convincing quality of this project. And maybe you know Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky. So she invented she was the first woman studying architecture in Vienna. She invented our modern kitchen design, but she was a very political architect. Her idea was, it was not about sharing care work with men. At that time, it was something out of imagination, but the idea was to save time for care work so that women have more time for political engagement. And we were really happy that she was the head of honor of our jury. So she was really an amazing woman. Building social space, so this is one of the principles. So Franziska Ullmann, so this is the front building, and she really changed the position of living rooms and kitchens in her maisonette types. So the idea is that you always see lighted windows when you're coming home, and all the main entrances, most of them, the housing entrances are really orientated here to this central pedestrian way. And you also have quite a lot of staircases. So this is also that we are quite convinced, and sociologists say there is something like a greeting border. So up to 30 flats on one staircase, you know who your neighbor are. If there are 100 flats on one housing entrance, the building becomes really very anonymous. So this we really also tried to follow in this principle in this project. So here you see this central place now looks much more charming. I'm sorry for this old picture. So there are now two huge trees. There's the underground garage beneath, but here you have this green pedestrian axis. Here you have these shielded courtyards with the playground for the small children, and here you have this bigger area. There is one typology of flat for different life phases. It's about 85 square meters, and the idea is really that all the rooms have the same size, so you really can change the furniture and you can switch the functionality of your rooms. This was developed by Elsa Prohaska. And also the idea was to have this outstanding kitchen ale, so also to show the value, to make the value of care work visible. And the kindergarten, that's really a bit, I think, always the heart of the area. It was also designed by Elsa Prohaska because, for example, here, this is the floor and the windows are on the eye level of children. They have their own terraces. There are 3 groups, but due to the different levels, so they have staircases, they have protected play areas with shadow or protection from rain, and a lot of different details. So I think this is really there. You see this very the value of a very sensitive design. This was what we have learned. Also, we, with our gender lenses, very often you forget about young people. So we were very focused on kids. And there were quite a lot of conflicts in the beginning because they occupied the central area. People were complaining because of the noise. So I think this is one of the big unsolved problems, how to handle noise in our urban design system. So I think this is very often forgotten that this really, you have to plan noisy places. Maybe in Spain the acceptance for noise is much higher, but in our neighborhoods people complain all the time. And so there was really designed beside really a specific place, a chill area for young people. So this was an adaptation and reaction of these using conflicts. Secondary rooms as primary issues. So this is also something so that we have the obligation from our building law that you have, we call it, I don't know, a laundry room, a communal laundry room. And very often we questioned when we started the call of tender for this project that very often it was in the underground floor, it was very hot without windows, a tiny room, very unattractive. And so we changed this to washing saloons on the roof level with terraces outside. So you see it here. We have also now in the Franziska Ullmann's building, there are pram stalls on every floor, and every mother or father who has a screaming child really appreciate this if you have a very short distance from the pram stall to your floor. And also the underground garages, this is the idea that it's beneath the building, but it's integrated. There are the private terraces, and so there are there is daylight, so the windows are really integrated in the border of the private terraces, and so you really have daylight here, and all the staircases go down. So this is really not a space of anxiety. And also 30 years ago, we said, hopefully car use will be reduced in the future, and then you can really use part of this garage for other functions, because this is really quite a friendly, usable room. Very short about gender, this was quite a success. So there was really this realization. There was also a lot of reporting in the newspapers. So people loved it because people really wanted to move there. So the apartments were very quickly rent. So this was really a success. And I think it's really because people have trust in there was a neighborhood assembly. And when I told people, because they were very skeptical about there is a new project in the neighborhood, and they were angry because there are one-family houses, and so now they get multi-floor store houses. And so there was quite a lot of tension. And when I told them that this will be planned and designed by female architects, there was really a kind of relief in the room. And someone said, okay, then it won't become too ugly. And if you know the Viennese way of thinking, this is a compliment because we have a very negative language. So there was really this trust and acceptance that it would be a more sensitive design. And also the design of Franziska Ullmann really reacted to the neighborhood because it's 6 floors in the middle, but only 4 floors at the edge. So she has this kind of neighborhood sensitiveness. And up to this success or convincing results, we have been involved. Vienna changed its housing system, housing subsidy system to developer competitions. And I've been part of the jury as a gender planning expert for many years in these developer competitions. And also we developed, based on the evaluation of Frauenwerkstatt, a list of criteria. And this is really all the housing projects asking for housing subsidies in Vienna are really assessed following this list of criteria. And there are also several other projects. There are now 3 co-housing projects. It was started by Sabine Pollack, a teacher from the Technical University in Vienna. So there are 3 co-working. The interest is quite high in these co-housing projects. Maybe it's interesting that the rent contracts are only held by women. So the idea was that the power of decision making, all the planning decision, is in a collective way is by women. So you can debate a bit about if this is fair, but it was so the idea was just to have this kind of experiment. And this was intergenerative housing. So here, this was the second project, Frauenwerkstatt 2, and here was the idea to have with cooperation with the senior residents beside and to offer their new facilities. So I told you already about that. Gender-sensitive mobility. So this we really can say, and I always say I'm always missing the English word for it. I always say feminist planners are like, you have these pigs finding the precious mushrooms. I don't know, you use the pigs and they find the treasure in the soil. And I say, because we articulated the importance of pedestrian issues already 30 years ago. So we started with an exhibition, Who Owns Public Space? Women's Everyday Life in the City, following with a photographer, a small girl to a very old lady, a student in a wheelchair, a Turkish migrant housewife, a single manager, and to show their different needs. And we also analyzed for the first time that the model split. So this is a bit the holy number for mobility planners, and we show that the majority of carways and bikeways are done by men, and the majority of foot walking and using public transport was done by women. And at that time, nobody spoke about public space. Nowadays, it's really in the mainstream. All the city administration focus on public space. 30 years ago, this was really a new topic, and nobody spoke about pedestrian issues. So the bikers were just coming on the horizon of mobility planners, but not at all about pedestrian needs. And this really created awareness from our politicians. And then we decided to make a pilot district. In Vienna, we have 23 different mobility policies because we have 23 districts in Vienna, and the local political board, they are in responsibility about the financial means. And so they have a very decisive role. This makes it difficult for administration because they have to negotiate with all the local politicians to get the financial support for their proposals. And this was a new head in a district, and she was very initiative and focused on public space. And so this was really a pilot, a gender mainstreaming pilot process. All the departments involved in public space, responsible there in the 6th district, they were part of the team. And it was a process over 4 years, and topic were broader sidewalks. I realized in Valencia streets are much larger than in Vienna. In Vienna, we have historically quite small streets, and so you really have to argue over every centimeter. And we know that we have for the lanes, we have very strict rules. So this, not the private cars, but the big cars, LKWs, the trucks, is it? The trucks. So the truck is really in the head of mobility planners, and we said the truck on the sidewalk is a parent with a child and a pram, and you should have put the same attention on their needs than on the trucks And really, because it was, there is this difference, what I call planning lyrics. We have a lot of important aims and principles always written down. So since decades, we've had the goal of 2 meters minimum for sidewalks, but it was completely ignored. When it became difficult for the technical departments, they always reduced the sidewalks. So it was just a written principle, but not lived in practice. And we could really change this with the political support. So these 2 side meters minimum difference really became an accepted principle. And it were quite hard discussions. It was also here on this barrier freeness, because there is, so they became quite creative, because here you have a housing entrance, therefore you need this level, and there are staircases, and they just split the sidewalks. This safe crossing, it's quite tiny measurements. There were 6 weeks of high-level emotional debate between the head of the political board and the technical unit for road safety. They said this solution is impossible, it will not work, because this is a bit too complicated to explain why this was necessary. And then the head of the political, of the district board, she said, then let's just try it during the summer weeks. We make it like a improvisation. Let's try it for some weeks. And it proved that there are no problems at all, and then it could be realized. And so I think this was also quite important, these pragmatic reactions towards the resistance and doubts of the technical expert, and say, then let's just try and see if it works. And so this was a bit of change in the culture of the technical department. Traffic lights, that's also, we changed the traffic lights. So, because I think this is again the question of calibration, the speed calculation for the period of the green light for pedestrians, the calculation is for healthy grown-ups. And so we try to reduce the calculation speed, at least in front of senior residences. And also, and a very simple measurement, but seniors very often become very uncertain when they start to cross the street, and then the cars came around the corner. And then they get irritated and go back, or they feel unsafe, and quite a lot of car drivers don't respect, they just make this power play, and very often seniors drew back. And so we gave them 3 seconds in advance, so they could start 3 seconds earlier, and then they are already on the way. And car drivers respect them. So are very tiny measurements, but very effective. Safety issues, so they really made night walks, walking around. There is a women's commission, still the only district in Vienna that has a specifically women's commission. And they made night walks, walking around, identifying spaces of anxiety where there is lighting missing. And they made in their annual budget, they reserved a certain budget, they called it gender mainstreaming budget, but it was reserved for the improvements of the lighting situation. Another part of calibration is really that I learned a lot during this pilot process, how the work in the technical traffic departments function in Vienna. And so they have the obligation that they have to march and inspect the streets every 4 to 6 weeks. So they have to walk along all the streets. But these technical people working for the technical street, for the street department, they were completely focused again on the lanes. They were looking for obstacles on the lanes and didn't pay attention to the sidewalks. And we said if there is a small hole in the sidewalk, it means a much higher obstacle to wheelchair users, for example, than a small hole in a lane. So this is no disturbance for cars. And so this shift of attention was really important. And the man responsible for the 6th district, he really took this as his, as an obligation for him, and he was extremely supportive. And we also had to fight for sidewalk cafes. So, and I think due to COVID, so you have this tradition here in Valencia, but in Vienna it's also with the COVID crisis. So during the lockdowns, everyone wanted to sit outside. And it's always, again, that these 2 meters for pedestrians are respected. This is always a strong debate, and it was really also to convince, because these are the, not the technicians, but the people with the law background, and also to convince them that they really respect this pedestrian issue. So this was also a long process, and it needed, again, really the strong political will of the local head of the district. So I think it really needs this cooperation between politics and administration. And the outcomes, there were quite a lot of tiny measurements, but altogether really in the street crossings, pedestrian-friendly traffic lights, enlarging of pavements, lightning projects, barrier-free pavements or additional seatings, altogether really raised the level of for the pedestrian qualities. And it was also then there were elections in Vienna, and so I was quite excited over the outcome, because it was also during this election campaign that the head of the district said, yes, I have done something for pedestrians. And I was really anxious how voters will react, because car drivers, and of course there was the loss of parking facilities due to these measurements, if there will be an acceptance, and car drivers are very strong, always complaining if their quality is reduced, whereas pedestrians are very patient folk, accepting quite a lot. And so it was really good that the election, that there were really high gains for her. And so this was really a good signal that this really pedestrian-friendly policy also pays on a political level. So this was a good result of this pilot district. I want to change now to urban design. So also in our new, because this is the existing city, then we have a new urban design area, and I just wanted to show where we try really to make it as car-free as possible. So you only have some cars can go here and can go here, and the public, there are 2 underground stations, and the bus can go, only the bus can cross the area. And this has changed now that we really have this only collective garages, underground garages still, and we hope to improve this and to change to high-rise garages, because if we manage to get a post-fossil society, then hopefully we have more better use for our garages, and then high-rise buildings are better for the changement. And they are less expensive, because we are using quite a lot of money for our underground constructions. And what we also try to make now are these mobility points. And I think we really had this debate, so these sharing facilities, and very often it's only the discussion about cars, e-cars, bikes and e-bikes. And I found this a nice example that you also can share other facilities. So this is also for pedestrians and how to transport children or this. So I think this is also that you also have in these new topics you should put on your gender lenses and think of more than the common groups. This is our most successful project. It's about gender-sensitive park design. And this is that we had because this was really like a ideal how it should work. So we had a socio-scientific survey done by feminist sociologists, and they showed that we have a problem in our parks, that up from the age from 9 to 10, girls disappear. For the small children, there are fair chances on the playground because the parents are there. But I was trained very long ago, as you see on my hair color, I was trained for designing playgrounds. It was really the boys' interests, sport interests. So kids are always male kids because they create conflicts. If the design does not follow and the park does not offer enough facilities, they create conflicts. They make graffitis, they make noise, they took the place. Girls just withdraw them. They just fade out. And so they create no problem and no conflicts. And therefore there was not this awareness that there were quite a lot of young girls missing in our parks, in the park use. And this created really awareness on the political level, but also within administration. And then we realized 6 model projects, 4 of them with active participation of girls. And we realized the projects, and then we made an evaluation. So the usability, so the use, if this has changed, because these have been existing parks, and this showed a success. And we also made a design analysis of other parks. And then we created planning recommendations for gender-sensitive park and playground design. And this is really that I can say every new or redesigned park in Vienna really follows this principle. So this is really mainstreaming as it best, starting with a study showing we have a problem, realizing pilot projects, and then the consequent rollout. But I think it's still quite easy because public parks are owned and managed by the city itself. So it needed some energy and resistance in the beginning, but it was really that the male head of the planning unit of the planning department, and he was really resisting in the beginning. And in the end, he went in his leisure time to feminist urban landscape architects workshops per interest because he was really convinced by the idea. So I think this is really I think therefore evaluations are so good because you really can show that it make a difference. If you change the design, that you really can show that you have a change in the user groups. So here you have some pictures of that. As time is running, I have to skip now all my other topics. Just to show you the picture participation, this is since some years a topic. This happens this is a normal, they showed us as a success. So this was the planning department reporting to our coordination unit. We have done participation project for a specific area, and they didn't realize I was laughing seeing the photo, and they didn't know why I laughed. So this happens when you invite in the public office in the evening hours. So if you just make a posting to every household in the surroundings, then it can happen that you have a picture like that. Or it makes a difference if you have a whole weekend, a tent on the future site, inviting all the peoples. And what we also have learned, if you're offering tables like that, then also the silent people will come and talk and telling their opinion, because it's difficult for some groups to speak for the whole audience, but if you have a face-to-face conversation, then you learn much more of the needs and opinions of the silent groups. And so we have done this in the redesign of a public area in Vienna, and this was really on with coffee and cake on the place. And they were feminist landscape planners, and they also spoke different languages, because this is a poor migrant area, and they spoke Arabian and Turkish. And they made, so we offered coffee and cake, and people designed, they designed what people told them. And we have also learned, we have people to ask what you want to do on a place, not what elements of equipment you want, but what kind of activities, because then you get a broader picture. And then we had these feedback points for people in hurry, just to give you 5 points and then give pictures to the kind of atmosphere you want to have on the place. And then we differentiated by color, the sex, and by size, the age, so to identify the kids and the youngsters. And this is a very cheap method. But for example, I could realize that the boys were giving their points, but no girls. And then they jumped to every girl passing by and say, give your opinion. So this is really a very interactive, simple method. And we also learned that green elements are much more important for women than for men. So sometimes it's also, and again, men were asking for bike needs, and women much more discussing the situation of public transport stops. So this was really redesigned, and this is a nice sign. There was the involvement of a school class, and they have already been very active, and they organized girls' days, because it was a quite male-dominated place. And they already had this tradition of organizing twice a year activities for girls there, open air activities to reach out to the place. And they have been asked, and they said it would be nice to have a real stage there for our activities. And now this says it's the first girls' stage in public space. Of course, it can be used by other groups, but it makes a good sign, I think. Placemaking activities, all these small button-up activities are just rushed through it. Neighborhood gardening, parklets. We give subsidies to change the use of the park lanes so that you have these non-consumption possibilities. This is Lake City Aspen, one of the largest development areas, where we make a trip chain check, defining the different typical trip chains, bringing the child to the kindergarten, leaving home, bringing child to the kindergarten, go to public transport, coming back, picking up the child, doing the shopping, going to the park with them, to see if this city of short distances really work. And we have a managed shopping street there. I think this is really gender relevant, that the ground floors, there was the obligation that this is organized in the logic of a shopping mall, but it's a shopping street. And when people move in, they already find everything they need, a supermarket. So I think this really makes a difference. There are some impressions, and we really want to reduce car use. There are high-rise garages. There is this separate lighting for pedestrians. And on a symbolic level, all the personalized street names are female there in all our new urban development areas, because there is this historical bias of all the honored men, and so we try to reduce this bias with our future street naming. So just to rush through, so there are impacts on different levels and quite successful one. I think urban design, your task is the most conflicting one. But we have reached progress that green parameters really count. We have had it on paper over 20 years, but they have been ignored, all these conflicting aims, and always the green areas, they shrinked during the planning processes, and now green infrastructure as a backbone, shading diagrams to improve urban design, also the outer spaces for social infrastructure, position of infrastructure. So from a gender planning point of view, we supported this. Last, what I want to show you is a fairness check. This is a very simple method, but it helps to structure the discussion. We could call it gender check, we called it fairness check. It's that you define your target groups, and it depends on your planning task. And then you discuss the measurements, and you say if it has a positive impact for the group or not. And then you can see in the end, if for a group there is no, you think it's an important group, but in the end, there is not much of improvement for that group. And so we have done this for our mobility concept and for our strategic concept for mobility and public space, and we involve gender experts, diversity experts, and social inclusion experts. And we really redefined or sharpened quite a third of the measurements. So I think time is over. A role play, this is also what I find interesting. We tried it once to discuss to make the analysis of an area in different roles. So one is a small child, one is an old person with this rollator, I don't know, this walking facilities, and to have really in mind, so really to take the position. And we have never done this, but it would be interesting to have an urban design jury, for example, discussing it for the different groups, so the strengths of our urban design proposal. We have all put this, our hand-knitted methods we have developed in a manual. There is an English translation, and you find it in the internet. I also want, what I find useful, there is a World Bank manual, Handbook for Gender Inclusive Urban Planning and Design. And it was inspired a little bit by this Viennese manual, and there you find a lot of very interesting methodology. It was developed by a young Swedish company, a lot of interesting tools there, and a lot very convincing practical examples. For example, the pink taxis in Latin America. So I really like this manual. And what we have done, that I have been involved, was a manual for Tbilisi, for the capital of Georgia, from the Asian Development Bank, Fair Shared Cities, Guidelines for Social Inclusive and Gender Responsive Residential Development, and for Green and Recreational Spaces. And this was the adaptation to Tbilisi, and we really tried, I really liked the urban design. There are a lot of very good designs there, and we really tried. I worked there as a consultant, and so I think all the principles are there quite good formulated. So maybe this could be of interest. So this is a publication we have been involved, and so just, I want to kick this. So this was these obstacles and challenges. So I think in established gender mainstreaming administration, sometimes you're confronted with individual skepticism. So I think then you can only ask for professional behavior. On the professional level, very often is this lack of methods, tools, and experiences. So I think we need this exchange, what really functions with few time-consuming activities, what is really practical. And on a structural level, I think it really helps if you have planning regulations and urban parameters that are really, then you don't have to argue for every project, then you can say these are our regulation and that's our standards. So additional costs, I think this is not necessarily. Additional workload maybe in the beginning, so to calculate a higher time need for pilot projects. And these negative or skeptical public reactions, our experience is that this exists only much more in the professional bubble. Normal people and normal citizens, they realize the value of this very practical everyday approach. So we get much more positive reaction than in this small planning world. So I want to end. This is our rooftop gardens biotope for the city of Vienna. And I think we really all know that we have really to transform our cities due to the current crisis and the climate change adaptation. And I think that we have known that in the 19th centuries, our cities really have, by the technical and industrialization, really have been really transformed, and only with male technicians. And I'm really quite convinced if we manage the necessary transformation, it really should be with the support of the whole abilities and the support of all parts of population and of all parts of experts. And I think gender-sensitive, social, sustainable, and fossil urban restructuring is a chance, and we should start immediately because time is running. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, you talked about the design of parks that were more inclusive for girls. What were some of the design principles that you applied for that to happen?
One important thing was that we learned, for example, that also girls want to play soccer, I think, football, the European version soccer. And in Vienna, because we have small parks, we have this, we call them ball cages. So you have high fences as a protection from the sharp balls for the surroundings. And this is a very hermetic place, and we say the sociologists, they define it as the jungle law, because if there is one group playing, so there is no place, the other groups don't dare to go in. And so when there are small boys playing and the young adults came, they kicked them out of the cage, and they were all convinced no place for girls. And then we tried, the feminist landscape planners, they proposed a change design to make it like a V, so that you have three play fields, and that we also learned that girls are watching, and also small children watching how is there a quiet corner where we also can play and mingle. And so you have we offering sitting facilities in the middle of podest and more entrances, and so that more groups can use it at the same time. So this is one of the principles. Or slackline, we learned that girls really like to balance. And my English vocabulary, sorry. The swing, collective swings, where many children can use it, or hammocks are extremely popular. We are now installing hammocks, and really old parents, the babies, they swing the babies, but there are also young couples there, or 5 children sitting in one hammock and chat. So these are very multiple use, so interesting for different groups. So this is some of the reaction. And also this is quite traditional, but I think it's important to react. In one of the parks, there are a lot of migrant girls, and we know that in a lot of traditional migrant families, the girls are responsible for their younger siblings. So they have to go with the smaller ones to the park, and they are responsible for them. And therefore, we try to make the playground for the small children and offering them beside also some climbing facilities, for example, so that they can have their own area but have a look on their smaller siblings, for example. Or to find a place for elderly people, or we'll know also that girls, this communication is for girls much more important than for boys. Traditionally, of course, it's always difficult to say typical girl, typical boy, but this protected communication areas is also very attractive for girls, what we have learned out of the participation projects.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to ask you, what would be your recommendation for starting to question this male perspective in urban design in countries where we don't even talk about that, you know what I mean? To start implementing the perspective design, the gender design, in countries where we don't even question the male system right now.
I'm not quite sure if I have catched your...
She's asking how she could work in a place where this topic is not on the table.
What would be your first recommendation? The first step to start asking about these questions, or demanding for these kind of spaces, or even introducing this perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this fairness check could be valuable, to just really say who are the users for the urban design. And we make this differentiation. We say the local orientated citizens, inhabitants. So there are people much more depending on the quality of their immediate neighborhood. These are small children, elderly people we know from the age from 75, so the radius become much smaller, and so they are really depending on the quality. Youngsters, they move for long distances. Sometimes they're quite happy if they are out of sight of their parents. But for these groups, for example, so we say, and people doing the care work, so they're really depending on this. And so I am becoming extremely pragmatic over the years. So I know that the word gender sometimes creates a lot of resistance. Yeah, we have this in the newspaper. They are writing the right-wing newspapers about gender madness. We have presidential election, and one of the right-wing candidates says he will not sign laws that are gendered, use gendered language. so we will not win, but it was interesting. So if you have this kind of atmosphere, then I think the outcome is important. Yeah? So let's call it a fairness check or user group orientation. That's a very neoliberal vocabulary, this user group orientation. But if you start to really or speak about everyday life and everyday life qualities, then I think it's also for the mainstream sometimes easier to accept, but it has the same approach, so speaking about this necessity. And what I also have learned is that we are all architects or planners, we are visual animals. So it really helps if you don't not only write principles, but if you, for example, the pre-qualification of an urban design, that you really show it the distances and showing the quality by sketches really supports discussion.
Bueno, podríamos seguir haciendo preguntas, pero yo creo que vamos a pasar a la siguiente conferencia. Hola, Ollane. Marilda, ¿tú no quieres nada? Marilda es una compañera en el taller, ¿no? Que la tenemos aquí también. Todo esto lo podemos hablar en clase y podemos contactar con ella. Yo creo que seguimos. Thank you so much, dear.
And sorry for talking too long.